South Azure has fallen, but it is becoming obvious to the League forces that this might be a Pyrrhic victory. The starport has been destroyed, right along with its antiquated air defense grid. It would take an entire phase of the war to repair the starport, which is a very long time for the players. For reference, this campaign is nearly a year old, and we are only in the second phase of the war. With the loss of the starport and without any land-based logistics routes, repairs for the damaged mechs are extremely expensive in both time and war chest points. Both resources the League forces are lacking due to their recent aggressive campaign to take the city. The only way to get in and out is via Aerodyne dropship, which has limited cargo capacity, so not very efficient for supplying an occupation force. And because the routes to the north are all under control by House Corbin, the only other viable option is the Long Walk of Shame, which starts with a water crossing from Welterkeep to Sinigit. That action, of course, would anger the neutral city of Sapphire Bay, so crossing through the city would be a political catastrophe. Therefore, they would need to go around. So, off to Gildenmel, Brackenvale, Blazethorn, Snowmont, Incroth, Lunamill, and finally, Easterwich. Hey, I know that place. We've been there. Got a souvenir and everything. Walking back to friendly controlled territory would take a long time and manifest a political headache with Sapphire Bay. So maybe it's not viable after all. The League took South Azure, a major setback for House Corbin, but it is steadily growing into a catastrophe for the League. And to add insult to injury, House Corbin's reinforcements have arrived in orbit. The League is aware the reinforcements have arrived, but they do not know how woefully under strength they are. House Corbin did not spend as much as the League had on reinforcements. After the Battle of Frigid Cape, House Corbin thought they had the League broken. An overestimate of their success led to a bad decision several months ago. House Corbin banked their points to save up for the overall victory and had only paid for a meager reinforcement comprised of 2 additional mech companies. They also acquired equipment to replace losses in existing units, as well as to field a brand new battlefield support company. But before we get into what House Corbin is about to do with their reinforcements, let's take a look at what was going through the minds of the League players. You see, with the lack of resistance to take South Azure had led the League to wrongfully believe that House Corbin was maneuvering for a counterstrike. In fact, they thought the starport was destroyed in order to stifle the League from bringing in reinforcements, which is true, but it was mainly destroyed to make it more difficult for the League to reposition their clan binaries to other theaters of the war. The League players had convinced themselves that House Corbin's reinforcements would be striking from the north, while the defense forces that evacuated South Azure were massing somewhere here in order to strike and hold the League's only land-based egress route at the water crossings of Welterkeep and Griffinroth. If House Corbin took those water crossings, then the League could be trapped in a pincer maneuver. But this is not what was happening. The League is not aware of House Corbin's operation, Skip Town. The truth is, House Corbin was retreating from this theater in order to regroup for other battles. So, operating under the concern of a looming counterattack, the League repositioned their surveillance satellite from the water crossings in the north to finally scan the southern region, looking for the phantom army of supposedly massed forces somewhere near Swinestone. Unfortunately, before the intel report was generated, House Corbin's reinforcements had landed at Blue Shore, but instead of heading towards South Azure, they went charging off towards Mortarbourne, locking themselves into battle. We will get to this battle in the next battle report. The developing situation at Landbridge was alarming for the League, but at the same time, they were shocked by what they had discovered about House Corbin's forces in the Southern Theater. There was no counterattack in the making. The enemy had simply given up and fled. Not only that, but the majority of the enemy had already escaped right under their noses. But there was still a chance to lock down and destroy House Corbin's 3rd mech and 2nd armor, hiding just east of Azurefell. The League collapsed from all directions on House Corbin. However, unbeknownst to the League forces, House Corbin has dispatched their newly acquired Aerodyne dropships to evacuate their units. But will they arrive in time, or will the League be able to isolate and destroy another significant force of House Corbin? This is the Battle of East Azurefell. Welcome to the lonely road that connects Azurefell and Darkstrand. This location is about as far from human civilization one could get on Bluehole, and now it's a battlefield. The League forces have the option to attack from either the east or west, but war chest points are tight, so they settle on committing their entire 3rd Mech Company to the attack from the west, and leaving the 1st Mech Company in Darkstrand. House Corbin is surrounded, and if they run, they could potentially run into more Chupacabras, but House Corbin has a few tricks up their sleeve. The reinforcements in orbit have 2 Aerodyne dropships, and they have been dispatched to this battle. If House Corbin can hold out long enough, they will be airlifted to safety. Let's have a look at the forces. The Chupacabra 3rd Mech Company is comprised of 3 lances. The first lance is the 7th Light Cav. Unfortunately, one of the mechs was destroyed at the Battle of East Welterkeep. A replacement mech warrior is filling in, utilizing a captured Crusader mech, generously donated by the Grand Army of House Corbin. However, this caused them to lose their lance formation pilot abilities. So, none of the mechs have the speed demon ability, but there are a few veteran mech warriors operating in this lance. The 8th lance is a heavy battle lance comprised of a Banshee, a Marauder, a Centurion, and a Grasshopper. The mech warriors are all regular. The 9th lance is a fire lance with an Archer, Longbow, a Viper, and a Zeus. The mech warriors for this lance are also all regular. Let's have a look at House Corbin's forces. The defenders are comprised of the 2nd Armor and 3rd Mech Companies. Both companies have participated in quite a few battles, and their rosters keep getting shorter. The 2nd Armor has 1 lance of Kamasori tanks and an understrength lance of LRM carriers. House Corbin's 3rd Mech Company is also in this battle fighting against the Chupacabras 3rd. The company has a light battle lance comprised of 2 Wasps, a Bushwhacker, and a Trebuchet. The 8th Battle Lance is a heavy battle lance, which has had the last remaining mech of the 9th Battle Lance folded over to this lance. It is now comprised of 2 Atlases, a Warhammer, and the 9th Lance's rifleman. House Corbin is trying to escape this theater of battle. This area has 2 potential landing zones for Aerodyne dropships, located here and here. Unfortunately, since House Corbin is being pressured, they are prioritizing saving their mechs. The 2nd Armor will attempt to cover the mechs and fight as long as possible, and if there is room on the last dropship, they will board. If not, then their heroic sacrifice will at least enable House Corbin to preserve their battle mech strength. We want to take a moment and thank all of our generous supporters from Patreon. All of your support makes these battle reports possible. We also want to notify you of a new notable noble worthy of public notification. Thank you, Nicholas D. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. House Corbin won the initiative. The Chupacabras will move and shoot first. The Chupacabras activate their fire lance. The Viper jumps to the top of the hill, giving it line of sight for possible indirect fire missions. The Zeus, Archer, and Longbow move into the center of the map, moving parallel with the bridge. House Corbin, for proportional movement, activates their 8th Heavy Battle Lance, and they sprint onto the battlefield. They want to put as much cover between them and the fire lance. The LRM carriers ground move in behind them, scanning the horizon for mechs to unleash their missile volleys upon. Seeing where House Corbin deployed his heavy battle mechs, the Chupacabras activate their heavy battle lance to mirror their movements. The Centurion sprints into cover of some woods, while the rest of the lance charges across the shallow river straight at House Corbin's heavy battle lance. House Corbin no longer needed to do proportional movement, so they activated their tank lance, who ground moved into the center of the map near the highway. The Chupacabras activate their last lance, the 7th Light Cav. They deploy in the north and ground move onto the hill behind cover of the woods and try and get line of sight on the tanks. House Corbin activates their last lance, the Light Battle Lance. They move in formation down the highway, keeping the woods between themselves and the Chupacabra 7th Light Cav. And that brings us to the shooting phase. The Chupacabras will shoot first. The Fire Lance will make indirect fire attacks at the LRM carriers in the open. The Viper forgoes his own shooting so he can be the spotter for the rest of his lance. The target number comes to a 10. The Zeus and Archer misses, but the Longbow rolls a critical strike. This deals 2 damage to the LRM carrier, completely removing its armor, and with a critical roll of 4, damages the LRM carrier's fire control. Next up, The 7th Light Cav opens fire on the tanks sitting in the open. Unfortunately, the target number was too high for the Crusader, and the Fenris doesn't have any long-range weapons. That left the veterans of the Mad Cat and Little Blue with target numbers of 10, and they both missed. Since the heavy mechs had sprinted, they cannot fire this turn. That ends the Chupacabra's shooting. House Corbin can now fire back. Their heavy battle lance also sprinted, so they cannot fire. That left the tank lance, the LRM carrier lance, and the light battle lance, all of which targeted the Viper on the hill. The target number was an 11 for the units at medium range. One tank and the trebuchet hit, dealing a total of 3 damage to the Viper's armor. With shooting complete, that brings turn 1 to a close. Both sides have mechs sprinting into positions to have better shooting next turn. However, the Chupacabras still do not know that in turn 3, the first dropship will arrive on the scene. In turn 2, the Chupacabras won initiative. House Corbin will move and shoot first. They decide to activate their tank lance, which pushes up to the edge of the woods for cover. The Chupacabras activate their fire lance, who all move into cover behind the hill in order to be in position for indirect fire attacks. House Corbin activates his heavy battle lance, and ground moves into cover of those woods. The Chupacabras activate their heavy battle lance, and they ground move towards the hill, using both the woods and the crest of the hill as cover. House Corbin needs to do proportional movement, and therefore activates 2 units. The LRM carriers ground move forward, and still vulnerable and out in the open. I think the player was trying to entice the Chupacabras to attack the vehicles instead of their mechs. And finally, the light battle lance activates and tucks themselves into cover of the woods that stretch along the road. Sensing an opportunity to try to flank House Corbin's forces, the Chupacabras activate their last lance, the 7th Cav. The Crusader moves along the ridge into cover. The Mad Cat sprints into cover while the Fenris moves down the hill and into some cover. Little Blue jumps from the hilltop into a favorable position. With movement complete, we head into the shooting phase. House Corbin will shoot first. The 2 Atlases of the heavy battle lance and the entire LRM carrier lance fire at the Centurion in cover on the hill. The target number was a 10. All of the LRM carriers miss. However, using a lucky point, the Red Atlas hits the Centurion, dealing 3 damage to its armor. The Rifleman and Warhammer fired at the Marauder with a target number of 10. The Warhammer missed, but the Rifleman hit, dealing 4 damage to the Marauder's armor. However, the Rifleman generated heat from firing their weapons due to the critical damage of its engine sustained at a previous battle. The Light Battle Lance, which is at medium range, also fired at the Centurion with a target number of 10. However, despite lucky points, only the Trebuchet hit, dealing 3 damage to the Centurion. This removed the last of the armor and caused structural damage. This necessitated a critical damage check, and the fire control was damaged. The tanks took aim at the Fenris closing in on their right flank. The target number was an 11, and they all missed. The Chupacabras can now shoot back. The Mad Cat of the 7th Cav could not fire since it had sprinted, but the rest of the lance take aim at the tanks. For the Fenris and Little Blue, the target number was a 9. For the Crusader, the target number was an 11, and the Crusader missed, but Little Blue and the Fenris both hit, dealing enough damage to destroy the tank. The critically damaged Centurion is spotting for the Fire Lance, who conducts an indirect fire barrage on the Rifleman. The target number was a 9. The Archer, Longbow, and the Zeus all hit, dealing 5 damage to the Rifleman's armor. The Rifleman is in pretty bad shape. It already has 3 structural damage and a critically damaged engine from a previous battle. It is barely holding itself together. But one of the defining qualities of the Chupacabras is their lack of pity for the enemy. The Marauder takes aim at the Rifleman with a target number of 8, and the Marauder nailed the Rifleman, dealing enough damage to destroy the mech. This brings turn 2 to a close. Both sides exchanging fire, and House Corbin lost a mech and a tank. However, roaring across the skies, the first dropship is inbound. Turn 3 sees the arrival of the first dropship for House Corbin, a great relief to the forces on the ground, and a complete surprise to the Chupacabras, who now knew why House Corbin was defending a battle space with so much open ground. They were guarding landing zones. This changed the Chupacabras' strategy. They wanted to quickly overrun House Corbin's forces and prevent any other dropships from landing if possible. They considered trying to shoot the dropships down, but they didn't have enough firepower to break through the tons of armor on a dropship. House Corbin won initiative, so the Chupacabras will move and shoot first, and they immediately activate the 7th Cav and maneuver into the field to try to disrupt any dropships from using it for landing. The House Corbin players are prioritizing evacuating their mechs, and he activates his heavy battle lance, which sprints aboard the dropship. The Chupacabras activate their heavy battle lance. The Centurion was in pretty bad shape, so it sprinted into cover, while the rest of the lance advanced towards the enemy. The LRM carriers, trying to create space for the mechs, maneuvered towards the approaching Chupacabra heavy battle lance. The Chupacabras activate their fire lance. The Viper moves towards the 7th Cav, linking up with their lance to help lock down the northern field. The rest of the Viper's lance advanced up the hill to start using line-of-sight targeting. House Corbin activates his last 2 units for proportional movement. The tank lance is sent around behind the Mad Cat and the Fenris. They are lining up perfect shots against the mech's rear arcs. The light battle lance moves towards the LRM carriers in the hopes of holding the southern field, giving up any hope of landing a dropship at the northern landing zone. After the game, the player realized he could have put additional mechs on the dropship, since Aerodyne dropships can carry up to 5 mechs. But in the heat of the moment, it slipped his mind. Goes to show you, hindsight is always 20/20. With movement complete, we head into the shooting phase. The Chupacabras will shoot first. The Marauder and Grasshopper shoot at the Trebuchet with a target number of 8, while the Banshee fires at the Bushwhacker with a target number of 9. They all hit. This immediately destroys the Trebuchet. However, it will be able to fire back for this turn. The Bushwhacker takes 4 damage to its armor, but it is still in the fight. The Archer, Zeus, and Longbow take aim at the damaged Bushwhacker. The target number was an 8. Fortunately for the Bushwhacker, they all miraculously missed. The Mad Cat and Fenris also opened fire on the Bushwhacker as well, but they also all missed. The Bushwhacker is one lucky dude. If he survives this, he will have some war stories to share. In an attempt to remove the threat of the annoying tanks, the Crusader and Viper shoot at one tank, and Little Blue fires at the other tank. They all hit, destroying one tank and dealing 3 damage to the other tank's armor. However, the tank will be able to shoot back this turn. House Corbin can now return fire. The LRM carriers and the entire light battle lance all take aim at the Marauder and open fire. The target number ranged from a 6 to a 9, with the exception of one Wasp. They all hit. This dealt enough damage to the mech to destroy it. All the tanks take aim at the Mad Cat's rear arc and fire at close range, and they all hit, dealing a total of 6 damage to the Mad Cat's armor. This brought turn 3 to a close. The dropship sealed their hatches and blasted off into orbit. The remnants of the heavy battle lance has successfully escaped, but this left the lance of tanks, LRM carriers, and the light battle lance to try and hold the southern landing zone for the next dropship, which is scheduled to arrive in turn 5. In turn 4, the Chupacabras won initiative, so House Corbin will need to move and shoot first. After some discussion, the House Corbin player requested an alternative LZ farther down the road. The Chupacabra player grinned and said, "You mean you want to run while I chase you down? Sounds fun." So, if that is what the players wanted to do, then that's what we're going to do. In the end, it's just a game, and the players wanted to have fun. House Corbin immediately activated his light battle lance and sprinted down the road towards Darkstrand. Long story short, the Viper, the Fenris, and Little Blue form a task force and peel off in pursuit of the fleeing mechs. We will get to that chase in a moment. Let's first see how the mop-up operation goes here first. The remnants of the 2nd Armor Company were left standing alone against 2 lances of battle mechs. Normally, faced with such odds, crews might consider surrendering, but 2nd Armor is full of malice. They are seething with anger from what has happened to their city and all the battles they have been part of. They refused to surrender and wanted to go down fighting. They continued to maneuver around the Mad Cat in order to try and take shots at the mech's rear arc. The Mad Cat and Crusader paired up, covering each other's rear arc, the typical anti-armored defensive formation. The tanks were able to successfully strike the Mad Cat, but they were ultimately destroyed by the mechs. The LRM carriers pushed into cover amongst the woods, but the heavy battle lance and fire lance all collapsed on their position. After a few turns of exchanging fire, they were ultimately destroyed. This battle marked the end of the 2nd Armor Company. They fought valiantly, but Battle mechs are the kings of the battlefield. Now, let's check in on the developing chase. Welcome to Farther Down the Road from East Azurefell. Both players agreed that a chase would be fun. So, as they left to go have some lunch, I scrambled to put together another battle map. This location has one potential landing zone for an Aerodyne dropship, but it's not ideal. You see, this location is getting close to Darkstrand, and there is a small community here which is comprised of 3 buildings. Unfortunately, those houses are located in the potential landing zone. A dropship could land at this location, crushing the houses, but it would delay the landing cycle of the dropship by 1 turn. Alternatively, the houses could be destroyed by the mechs, paving the way for the dropship to land without any delays. Either way, it is completely up to House Corbin how they want to do this, but the dropship will arrive on turn 4. The League player suspects a dropship is on the way, but does not know the timing of its arrival. The Chupacabras were given the option to activate their first mech company and attack from the other end of the map, but they opted not to, out of concern of their dwindling budget of war chest points. Therefore, only the Chupacabra task force will be deployed and try to run down the escaping mechs. For turn 1, only House Corbin has forces on the map, and they all sprint down the road, closing on the alternative LZ. For turn 2, the Chupacabras won the initiative, so House Corbin's forces will move and shoot first. The entire lance continued to sprint down the road. The 2 wasps can sprint 18 inches, and the bushwhacker can sprint 15 inches. However, the Chupacabras are much faster with ground movement that translates to 16 inches of movement on the battle map for both the Fenris and the Viper. The little blue Phoenix Hawk can only ground move 12 inches. Since House Corbin sprinted, they cannot fire, but the Chupacabras all target the bushwhacker. The target number was 8, and they all missed, including the veteran Little Blue. For turn 3, the Chupacabras won the initiative again, so House Corbin will need to move and shoot first. This time, the 2 wasps jump into cover behind some woods, and the bushwhacker sprints to get into cover. The Chupacabras continue to ground move in pursuit of the fleeing mechs, splitting up to get a little cover from House Corbin's mechs. On to the shooting phase, House Corbin can shoot first. Instead of shooting at the approaching Chupacabras, the 2 wasps turn their guns on the 2 houses that would slow down the landing procedure of the dropship and open fire. The target number was quite low and were easily destroyed. The Chupacabras can now open fire, and all of them fire at the bushwhacker. The Fenris and Viper miss, but at medium range, Little Blue is still quite dangerous and nails the bushwhacker, dealing 3 damage. This caused structural damage that necessitated a critical hit, and it was ammo destroyed. Luckily, the bushwhacker had case and was not instantly destroyed. On to turn 4, and the dropship arrives. Since the buildings have been destroyed, the dropship was unhindered and completed its landing cycle without delay. House Corbin wasted no time getting his mechs on board. The Wasp had just enough time to turn around and present a rude gesture as the hatches closed. Due to some bad luck with dice rolling, the chase was over with the majority of House Corbin's 3rd mech company escaping to orbit. The South Azure region is completely in the control of the League forces. But was this a Pyrrhic victory for the League? There is still another battle taking place at Landbridge, and the majority of the League's crack troops are still in this region. The campaign was a success, but will it cost the League more than it had bargained for? Only time will tell. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this battle report. We'll see you at the next battle.